Hey everybody, I'm Ryan, this is The Will to Make, and today I'm going to show you how to build this mud kitchen with a working faucet. So I started off this project by cutting down some leftover fence pickets left over from my platform deck build. I cut 6 pieces for the top and bottom shelves, 3 for each. Then I cut down 6 smaller braces that will hold my shelves together, again 3 for each shelf. These braces were ripped down on the table saw to final width. The shelves could then be assembled. I first laid down 3 boards. Then, making sure my boards were all lined up and squeezed together, I screwed the braces down, locking everything together. This was then repeated for the second shelf. Next, I could work on the legs. I needed 3 shorter legs on the front and 3 longer ones on the back. I first cut my fence pickets to length. The 3 longer legs needed a 22-degree angle on the top to accommodate the cover later on. My boards could then be ripped down to width on the table saw. With the legs cut, I could attach them to the shelves. I first laid out some scraps to lift the bottom shelf up evenly. I could then attach the front legs by just setting it on the ground and screwing it in. The back legs were done the same way, but making sure to keep that 22-degree angle slanted towards the front of the kitchen. The spacers could then be removed and the whole thing tipped on its back. The top shelf was then slid in and screwed down in the front. I then measured up how far the shelf sat in the front and made sure the back was the same before screwing it in as well. Next was the backsplash. These were 3 more pieces cut at the same length as the 2 shelves. The top board needed the same 22-degree angle cut on the top as well. These were then sat in place and screwed down. Now I could cut out 3 braces for the top cover, again with that same 22-degree angle on the top of the brace. If you ever need to cut an angle on a small piece, screw it down to another board first and make your cut. This is way safer than trying to do it by itself. These braces could then be screwed to the top with a couple of screws through the back. Now it was time for the cover itself. I started by cutting down 2 more fence pickets to the same length as the kitchen. The top piece needed that 22-degree angle on the one side. The second piece also needed the 22-degree angle, but then was cut in half. I wanted to make this look like a cloth cover, so with the dog ear from the fence pickets, I marked out along the front of the cover. With the jigsaw, these pieces could then be cut out. I then use this piece to mark the second piece for grooves that will help with the cloth cover look. To make these grooves, I put a depth stop on my miter saw and a couple of backing boards to allow the blade to cut all the way back through my board. The same was done on my second piece. The top piece could then be put in place and screwed down onto the braces. Then my bottom piece was held in place and screwed in as well. After this, I realized the kitchen was a little wobbly, so I added a couple of braces to the sides of the kitchen to stiffen it up. I could then go over the whole kitchen with my random orbit sander using some 120 grit sandpaper and rounding over all the sharp edges. Also, I will have links to all the tools I use in this video in the description below, so please check it out. I laid out where these bowls from the dollar store will go that will act as our sinks. I traced the outside of the bowl, but needed to inset that line a little since we wanted the sinks to sit flush with the top. A hole could then be drilled in the center to allow my jigsaw blade to pass through. The hole was then cut out. And the bowl could then be test fit. We bought these water pumps from Amazon to act as faucets, but needed a way to attach them. I started by tracing them on a board and cutting out the circle. The first hole could be tested and then the second cut out as well. On the miter saw, I cut these pieces down into squares. To make them look a little nicer, I cut a 45-degree angle on all the corners. I then set them in place and marked out where they will attach. I marked and cut out a small hole in the center where the tube will go that will suck the water into the pump. It could then be screwed into place. And then a test fit. The same was done for these two buckets underneath, one for the fresh clean water and another for the dirty water that drains from the sink. This will ensure that the pump never sucks in any dirt or mud. Now the bowls needed some drain holes drilled into them. To direct the flow of water a little better, I hot glued these funnels, also from the dollar store, to the bottom of the sinks. Now it was time for paint. I started by masking off for my gray. The tape could then be removed to reveal these nice crisp lines. The rest of the kitchen was then painted with multiple coats of white. I used a brush up top to give me better control to keep my nice crisp lines. For the final touches, I added this shelf from IKEA, first by marking where it will go. I then pre-drilled some holes. The shelf had the little keyhole hooks on the back, but I didn't have any screws that had a small enough head on them for them to work with these, so I just removed them and drove screws in from the back of the kitchen. I also wanted to add some hooks, but only had these eyelets, so I bent them out using some pliers to create some hooks. The mud kitchen was now complete and could be brought outside and set up. After everything had dried, my two spots for my faucets to sit had shrunk down, so my faucets didn't sit properly, but could easily be removed and sanded down at a later date. I added some pots and pans as well as some utensils. Last thing to do was fill up my two buckets and make sure everything was working properly. The mud kitchen was now complete and could be revealed to my two daughters, and they absolutely loved it. This is a great addition to our backyard, and I know it will get tons of use. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.